Hey, what's up, everybody? I'd like to welcome you to another Juice tutorial and a Happy New Year to you. I hope that you've all had a great holiday. It's been a couple weeks since I've done the last tutorial, and the reason being I didn't really have much of a holiday myself. I was really busy finishing up final projects and all of that business for university, but now all my final projects are done, and we're ready to kind of move forward with this, so you'll be seeing a lot more of me. So what we're going to do today is we're just going to continue on with our synthesizer tutorials here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create an oscillator class, and what that's going to do, that's going to hold a menu where we're going to be able to switch between three different types of oscillator waves. We'll do like a sine wave, a saw wave, and a square wave. And then what we'll also do is we'll try to refactor this code out that we set out last tutorial. So if you recall, we set out code that just set up our envelope parameters, our attack, decay, sustain, and release. And so at the moment, we have all of the UI code residing in our main plugin editor. And what we're going to do is we're just going to create a class for that, and then that class is going to hold all of our UI information for the envelope. And the reason that we're going to do it like this is because as what I'm looking to do is I'm looking to set up each class as kind of an individual component, and then depending on how I want the UI, I'm going to be able to rearrange that quite easily if I have them separated out into classes. Otherwise, the code is just going to be really jumbled, and everything's going to be mixed up. So we're just trying to get a little bit of organization into the code here. So I'm just going to go ahead, and first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add a oscillator class. So what we're going to do, since it's going to be a UI, since it's going to hold UI information, I'm going to add it as a new component class split between a CPP and header. I'm just going to call this oscillator. Create this. And I always forget to do this, but here we are. I'm going to open it up in Xcode. I'm just going to do a real quick build, make sure that we're all good. So while we're doing that, I just wanted to let you guys know once again about the Discord group that we have. So we have this Discord audio programming discussion group. So we have programming, we have developers of all different levels that are helping each other out and just talking shop about audio programming and DSP. So a lot of great developers in there. So come join us. I'll put the link below. So here we are, built fine. Okay, so we'll go ahead and we'll start this off. So just to let you know a little bit about kind of the workflow that I'm looking to do. So there are a couple different ways that you can start kind of passing variables, because if you recall, we have a UI component where we're holding all of our graphical information, and then what we want is when the user selects something with the graphical information, we need to take a variable and we need to pass that to the processor side to let the processor side know that, hey, something's going on. He hit a button, he moved the filter, he changed the resonance, something happened, and we need a way to pass those numbers between our different classes. So there are a few different ways that you can do this. I'm going to show you the way that I prefer. I prefer to do it using the audio processor value state tree. And what that does is that when I have a value that's being changed in a slider or in a menu, then that automatically goes over. I have that connected to the processor, and then the processor can then register the value, and then in turn that will take the value and it'll relay it to my synth voice class. So I'll show you a little bit more about how I do that. So I'll try to keep this tutorial as short as possible, but not move too quick at the same time. So I'm just going to erase some of this kind of boilerplate text here that we have going on. And so the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to use the ComboBox class to create a menu where we can switch between these different types of oscillators. So first thing that we'll do is we'll just open the API up and start doing that. So if we go here back to the API, I'm just going to type ComboBox So we can open that up and we can start seeing what we need to do to get this integrated. So we see that it gives us the drop-down list of choices, and then we see that, kind of like the slider class, there's a listener class that we need to use so it can register the events from the combo box and register those over to our processor side. So let's go ahead and start doing that. So I'm going to set up a combo box, and I'm going to call it OSC menu. And so now we have a menu, and we need to have ways that, well, we need to let the, we have to let it know what we want to populate that menu with. What do we want them to select? So if we scroll down here a little bit, we see this function here called add item, and then it just takes a string, which is going to be the string of what we want that text to be, and then it has new item ID. Now, one thing that I'm going to show you here is if we scroll down to the function itself, it says here, note that this value cannot be 0. Okay, so when we do a combo box object, the index actually starts from 1 and not 0. So that's just something to keep in mind as we're passing around, but I'll show you how to kind of deal with that. So we're gonna add 3 items here. So we'll do OSC menu, which is the name of our combo box, and then I'll just do add item, and then first item we'll just call sine, okay, because that's going to be our sine wave. That's going to be item number 1, and then we'll do the same thing for the saw wave and the square wave. So saw, that's 2, and then let's just do this for the square wave, and that's going to be called square, and that's going to be item number 3. Okay, and then we have to let it know, I don't know if we have to let it know, but we should let it know what type of justification we want the text to show in our menu. So we have this set justification type. So OSC menu set justification, and then I'll just put justification, and then we're going to put it centered, just so it's centered in the menu. Okay, and then what we could do is we could set a resized component here. So these are some numbers that I've kind of worked out before a little bit, because I've actually gone through and just created this synthesizer like the way that I want to finish it up, but I want to go through these one at a time. But rather than kind of going back and forth about like what the bounds and what the measurements are going to be, I'm just going to kind of write this in here. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a rectangle object. Rectangle, and then that's going to be of type int. I'm just going to call this area, and then this is going to be get local bounds. So what we're going to do is we're going to set some values for the size of the rectangle itself. I'm just going to do that quick right here before I forget. So I'll just do set size. I'm just going to make this whole window 200 by 200. Okay, so we'll go get local bounds, and then I can use this. I can use this measurement called reduced. So what this does is this actually just kind of shrinks the measurement of. So I have the area, which is get local bounds, which is 200, 200, and now I can shrink it in both dimensions by 40 pixels. So I'm just gonna, so that just gives me a little bit where I'm not actually just on the on the very edge of my boundary. Okay, so it just takes the local bounds, which is 200, 200, and then it shrinks it in every way 40 pixels. Okay, so I hope that makes sense. And then I'm going to do OSC, so we're just going to draw the menu itself. So we got OSC menu dot set bounds. And then I could say area dot, let me take a look here. I got remove from top. And then I'm going to just put that to 20 pixels. Okay, so this is something that I've kind of worked out already. And that I'm just basically going 20 pixels. So I've taken the area, I've reduced it all by 40 pixels, and then and then from that 20 pixels, that 40 pixel reduction, then I'm going a further 20 pixels down, and that's where I'm going to draw the menu itself. Okay, so I hope that makes sense. So now we have the menu itself. So now we need to register it as a listener. So we're going to go back here, and then if we go and we just add the functionality. So what we're doing now is we're just adding functionality that registers the combo box as a listener. So when that makes a change, then we can register it to the processor that, hey, the user wants to use a sine wave or they want to use a square wave now. So this is ComboBox Listener. Okay. I'm sure some of you are probably asking, how did I know that? So if we just go up to the ComboBox Class reference here, you'll see that there are these classes here that we use that we can use in conjunction with the ComboBox. So we have this listener class here. So if I go over to this ComboBox Listener class, you'll see that we have a pure virtual function that we need to implement for this. Okay, so ComboBox changed. Okay, it's kind of similar to the slider value change. So we just have to let it know, okay, when the user has made a change, what change has been made. And actually, funny enough, I'm not actually I need to implement it because it's a pure virtual function that things aren't going to work without it, but I'm not actually going to put anything in there because I'm going to actually relay these changes using the audio value processor state tree, and I'll show you how I'm going to do that. So we got void combo box changed, and then that's just going to be combo box. That's going to be a combo box, and then I'm going to call it I'm going to call the override function here because that is what we need to do when we're implementing a pure virtual function. So I just want to make sure I have my capitals fine here. Okay, so why is it complaining? Okay, cool. So now I just need to implement this function here. So I just have to name it void oscillator combo box changed. So we could just say combo box. Oh, I don't like when it does that. So I can just go combo box. I'll just call this box. And so I just put that in there because we have to implement it for things to work. Just to let you know, if you don't implement this function, but you put it in, but you write it in the .h file, you'll get an error. You'll get like all kinds of weird kind of errors, but it won't actually tell you that, hey, you need to implement your combo box changed object, your combo box changed function here. So just something to be on the lookout for, just in case you're getting like some crazy errors and you're not quite sure what's going on. So now we got this all implemented. We've drawn it. We need to register it as a listener. So we can say add and make visible. So this is going to be a child of this component. So I'll say OSC menu here. And then OSC menu add listener. And I think that's what I need. and then I can just say this. I think that's what I need to do. Just make sure this all works. So it's just compiling now. Okay, everything appears to be fine. Okay, so now we have the menu. And now what we need to do is we need to draw it. We can draw it in the editor itself. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to include, so we need to include the Oscillator class because it's a component class, and we're taking it and we're drawing it within the plugin editor. So I'm going to now include the Oscillator class in my includes at the top. So I hope that's clear to you why I've done that, because I need to draw the oscillator within the plugin editor, and so that's why I need to include that header file. Otherwise, it's not going to know what I mean when I say oscillator. Okay, so now what I can do is I can just say oscillator, because now it knows what I'm talking about. I'm just going to call this I'm just going to call this Osc GUI, maybe. There we go. So another thing that I'm going to do here is I'm going to now start commenting out the envelope itself here, because I'm going to put that in its own class later. So I can do this with all of these values here. And then I'm going to do this with all of this code that we set up last tutorial. I'm just going to comment it out for now. And then I'm going to change the size to 400, 200. This is something that I've kind of predetermined before. And then what I need to do, so now the oscillator, this UI that I've used to draw the oscillator menu is going to now be a child of the plugin editor. So now the plugin editor is basically going to hold all of these individual components that I'm creating. So I can say add and make visible, and that's going to be the oscillator. What did I call it? Oscillator GUI. Okay, so here we go. And now I can go down here into my resize method, and now I can actually draw the oscillator. So I could draw oscillator menu dot set bounds. So some of you might be thinking, hold on, you've already set the bounds for the oscillator menu. Well, I've set it within the oscillator class itself, but now I have to show where am I drawing it in respect to the whole window, and the whole window size is 400, 200. Okay, so actually I'm going to first do the same thing that I did before with the other class, which is I'm going to do a rectangle object. Rectangle, and it's going to be of type int. I'm going to call this area, and then I'm just going to say get local bounds here. Okay, so now I've got a rectangle that's the size of my whole UI. Okay, so it's got the same dimensions. It's set at 400, 200, 400 by 200. Okay, I'm just going to compile this quick because I see that it's making a complaint. Oh yeah, I'm not going to capitalize GU. I'm not going to capitalize the UI. I'm just going to call that UI like that. Okay, so let's see if it compiles all right for us now. Cool, look, everything looks fine. So, okay, great. So now I've got this. So now I've got this rectangle object, and now what I can do is I can actually lay out these components quite neatly and quite efficiently just by using kind of a dynamic way of dividing up this this rectangle. If you're not quite sure what I mean, I'd advise you to go back to one of my very early tutorials. I think it's called the rectangle class, and it shows how I do this. So now I can say OSC GUI dot set bounds. Okay, and then we got this rectangle object that we can put in there, which is the area. So I'm going to set up a component width, just these variables called component width and component height, because when I have these different components like the oscillator, the filter, and the envelope, I'm going to assign the same area, the same amount of space to each one of these components. So I'm just going to set up a const int component width, and we're just going to set that to 200. So each one of our components is going to be 200 pixels wide, and then I'm going to do a const int component height, and that's also going to be 200. And you'll see how I'm going to use these right now, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, so now I'm saying, okay, well, how big do I want the oscillator UI to be in the scheme of this bigger rectangle, which covers my whole UI, which is now 400 by 200. Okay, so what I can say is I can say area, and now I just want to lay out a 200 by 200 rectangle that's going to hold that oscillator, that's going to be the area for my oscillator. So it is removed from left. So I'm just going to go on the x-axis now. How much space do I want to set out for the oscillator itself? I can say component width. And then I can say remove from top as well. And then I'm going to put 200 there. Okay, so what that's done is that, oh, I'm going to change it, component height. And so the reason that I've done this is that this is something that I learned at the Audio Developer Conference in one of the UI seminars, and that is that when, let's say that at a later point we want to take this and we want to build it for iPad or for your iPhone or something else, rather than going and having all of these static numbers, what we can do is we can just use these kind of dynamic measurements, and then we can actually just change two. If I just go and I change two numbers, well, that goes in and that can change all of my UI component measurements, and that makes it a lot more efficient and easy to kind of scale things up, scale things down as we need to. So I think now I've made it visible. I just want to make sure that I'm not missing anything, and I've drawn the UI itself. So I'm going to go ahead and try to build this and see if the combo box actually has shown up in the UI. So you will see that here it is. Here's our combo box. We have our three menu items. Okay, it's not doing anything at a moment because we haven't attached it to the processor or to the synth voice class. But I'm going to show you how we're going to do that. But here's our menu itself. Okay, we haven't given it a default value either. That's why it's blank. Okay, so next part is we're going to go to the processor. And now, if you recall, we have these different, we have our audio processor value state tree object here. This holds all of our parameters. And now what I can do, or the way that I'm going to prefer to do this, is that I want to pass these values using the tree rather than using the ComboBox changed, slider value changed methods. I'm going to do it via the tree. And I don't know if there's any sort of advantage or disadvantage to this. If anybody knows, or if anybody has any justification to do it one way versus another way, I'd love to hear any sort of arguments for that, and just leave me a comment. So what I could do is I could just say, I'm going to go ahead and add a parameter. I just like doing it this way because it feels a lot cleaner. Feels a lot cleaner to me. Feels a lot like, okay, I can just add this one line of code. I can add a line of code to the oscillator, back in the oscillator class, and I can link those two things up, and now it knows what I'm talking about rather than having to go through a lot more code. If the slider is this slider, then that that value needs to change, so on and so forth. Just feels a lot cleaner and a lot more straightforward to me. So I'm just going to call this wave type. Then I'll do wave type with a capital. And then I'm going to call this wave type here. And then this takes, as you probably remember from the last tutorial, it takes a normalizable range object. So I'm just going to call this wave type param, and then I'm going to create that very shortly, and then I'm going to put this to a default value of 0, and then these are just going to not point anywhere because we don't need them. Okay, now we need to create this normalizable range of type float because it takes a float type of normalizable range. I'm going to call this wave type param. And then this is going to go from 0 to 2. So now this is a little bit kind of confusing. Took me a second to really kind of suss it out. But if you remember, if we go back to the oscillator class, when I have the actual ComboBox selection, the ComboBox selection starts from 1, goes to 2 and 3, okay? But when it passes when it passes the value over to the value tree, it's going to actually pass the value of 0, 1, and 2. So it's actually going to index the way that we normally index in computer science, from 0 rather than from 1. So that's a little bit confusing. Took me a second to really kind of figure out why I wasn't getting the right wave type and why it wasn't kind of working. But that's the reason. When you're passing, when you actually select it, so the index is from 1. When you're adding it as an item in the combo box, it starts from 1. But when it actually passes the value to the processor, it actually passes a value of 0. Okay, and we're setting the initial value to 0. Okay, so now we're going to have, so now we need to go back to the oscillator class, and we need to basically tell the oscillator, we need to tell the oscillator component, okay, when I make a change in the menu, I want to register it to this parameter. So this menu means this particular parameter that we're calling wave type. Okay, so what we're going to do is, if I go, so we need to do a couple things in order to do that. So we need to be able to access the processor first of all. Okay, and there are a few things that we need to do in order to make that happen. Okay, first thing we need to do is, if we go to our parent plugin editor, you'll see that we have this object that was created for us originally with the boilerplate code that was Juce Synth Framework Audio Processor. Okay, so that allows us normally in the audio editor to access the parameters in the processor. So what I can do is I can just copy this. Okay, I'm just going to copy it. Okay, and then I'm going to paste it here. I'm just going to put it down here. Okay, now it's going to complain because it's going to say, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know what this is. So what we need to do is we need to include the plugin processor header file. Okay, so we need to do that so that this object here actually knows what I'm talking about. Okay, now the default constructor, the way this needs to be set up in order for this to work, is that if we go to the editor, let me see, where is it? So if we look here, we can see that we have a Juce Synth framework audio processor object that we need to declare in our Oscillator class. Okay, so what I need to do is I need to change the constructor. So I'm going to change it in the header file first. So there are a few things that we just need to do to make this work. So I just take that and I paste that in. Okay, so that makes the constructor, because it's going to say the default constructor isn't right. So that's what I need to do to make that work. And then now here it's going to give an error because it's going to say, okay, the constructor values are different between the header file and the CPP file. So now I'm just going to call this processor P, and now I'm going to use a initialization list, so I can say processor. So processor is what I'm talking about here. Okay, just talking about this processor, and I'm just linking these values up. Just what this means is, okay, by P, I'm saying by processor, I'm saying this object here, P. Okay, and I think that's fine. Okay, I'm just going to build this real quick, make sure. I got a complaint. Okay, so must explicitly initialize the member OSC GUI, which does not have a default constructor. Yeah. So what's happened here is I've changed. So I've changed the constructor now to this. Okay, where I say, okay, anytime I say oscillator, I need to be talking about. I need to create this argument. So what I need to do now is when I go back over here to my plugin processor.cpp, in here, I need to create the argument for the object that I've called, wait, sorry. Let me make sure I got this right. No, not in here. Let me go back, remove that comma, or it's not going to work. In the editor, sorry about that. In the editor, you'll see that I have these initialized, and I need to actually add this here. So this object is called OSC GUI. I'm just going to say OSC GUI P, and let's just build that, see if that works. Okay, because I just have to initialize that with the P argument there. Okay, and you'll see that it succeeds now. Okay, so now we have the value tree that we've created on the processor side, and now we need to link it with the oscillator side. So it knows that when I change something on the menu, it lets the processor know that, hey, I've made a change. So I'm going to go here, and I'm going to go back here. And if you recall, I created a scoped. If we look back to our plugin editor when we were creating the ADSR, I'd made a scoped pointer of slider attachment, audio processor values tree state, slider attachment type, and then I called that attack val, and then I set it up and I linked it with the sliders. Okay, so we just need to do the same thing here in the oscillator class, except it needs to be a ComboBox type. So I can say scoped pointer, and that is audio processor value tree state, and then that is combo. We actually have one that's for the combo box, and you'll see, I'll show you here because I think it's quite important here. ComboBox attachment. So it's audio processor value tree state ComboBox attachment class. Okay. And so we're back here. So we got ComboBox attachment. Okay, and I will just call that OSC menu. Is that, can I use that? Oh no, that's the name of my combo box itself. So so I'll call that wave selection. And so then down here I can just say, so this is all in my code here. I'm going to put this up here because it just feels more correct. And then I can say wave selection. Since I'm using a pointer here, I can use new, and the scoped pointer will automatically delete it when it's back out of scope. So I could say new audio processor, sorry about this, audio processor value tree state, combo box, attachment. And then there are some arguments that I need here. So it says state to control. Okay, so it's saying, okay, cool, you want to control a parameter. Let me know what parameter that you want to control. Okay, so if I go back to my processor here, just to remind you, this is the parameter that we want to control. So we need to access the object called process plugin processor, okay, that we created. So that's what we use with the processor object that we created. And then the name of the object in the actual name of the object, we called it tree. Okay, so just to show you, if I go down here, you'll see that I've created the object name is called tree. So I'm just going into the processor and I'm saying I'm talking about this particular object, the tree object. Okay. And then the next parameter is the string for the parameter ID, which is called wave type. So wave type. And then it's going to say what combo box do we want to attach it to. And that is OSC menu, which is the name that we've given to our particular combo box. Okay, so this just says, okay, cool. What two things do you want to connect between the UI side and the processor side? And I'm saying, okay, I want to go into my tree state. I want to grab the parameter. The parameter is called wave type. And then I'm going to connect it with the combo box that I called OSC menu. And that is actually making the connection between those two things. So when I make a change in the menu, it's going to take and it's going to register that change back to this parameter that I've created, okay, called wave type. Okay, so let's just see, and I've given it a default value of 0. So when we pull up the menu this time, it should show a value, the first item in the list, which is sign, hopefully. So here we go. And then you will see here that it now shows the first menu in the list, which is sign. And now I can select these, okay, and I can make my wave choice. Okay, so now the menu part itself is actually set up. So now I've set this up. So now I need to go and now I need to relay the value that this is, and I need to relay it to where my oscillator, my actual oscillator actually resides, which is here in synth voice. Okay, so we've taken the menu, we've created the menu in this oscillator class. We've connected it with the processor value that we've called wave type, and now we need to take that value and we need to relay it to synth voice, because this is where kind of all of the meat of our DSP is actually being called. Okay, so the way that we're going to do that is we're going to create a function, okay, kind of similar to the way we did with get envelope params. Okay, I'm going to call this void get osc type, and then we'll just do float selection. Okay, and then we're just going to do that for now. Okay, because then what I could do is I can go over here and I can go to my plugin processor, and you recall I set up this if function, which was the dynamic cast, where what I've done is now when I get the voice, if it successfully casts as a synth voice, then it passes. It says, hey, okay, we're gonna get ready to play the voice, but we need to know what parameters we need. We need to know what type of attack, decay, sustain, release. We need to know what wave type it is. Okay, so now what I'm doing is I'm going to say my voice, which is the type, which is my object that I've created in the plugin processor. Okay, this synth voice called my voice. So I'm going into here, and now I need to go and I need to call this function called get osc type. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually pass this value. I'm going to pass the value from the value tree up here called wave type, and I'm going to actually pass that parameter into synth voice. So I'm going to relay it over to synth voice. So get osc type, is that what I called it? Get osc type. Okay, and then from here it's going to say, okay, what float. So you remember I created the function with a float pointer. Okay, so now it's going to say, okay, we need a float pointer for the argument. So I can say get raw parameter value, and then here I'm going to say wave type is the parameter that I'm looking for here. Okay, so let's just test this out real quick. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just do a cout. Since it's a pointer, I need to dereference it by using the star operator here, which is going to give me the value. Oh no, is it going to freeze? Okay, cool. It's going to give me the value that resides at this memory location that I've called selection. So we'll just try this here, make sure that everything is kind of relaying properly here. Okay, so we've pulled this up. We'll pull our synthesizer up here. We see that it has a selection of 0 now that it's passing, and then if I change this menu item, it should change to 1, and it changes to 1, and now it changes to 2 when I select the square wave. So now that works properly. So one thing that I think somebody in the Discord group mentioned was that we probably shouldn't need to actually pass these values in the audio callback, where so you see that it's passing it at audio, is passing these values at audio rate. I don't know if that's the case, because my thinking is that it needs to know that if you change the selection, if you change the attack, or if you change one of the parameters, it kind of needs to know what that value is at audio rate. So that's why, to me, that feels that feels right. The way that I'm doing this feels right. But if there's a better way, I would love to know it, and let me know in the comments or in the Discord group. So you'll see that this is fine. Okay, so I can now erase this console out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a parameter here. I'm just going to call this, I'm going to actually call this the wave, which is what I've created here. I'm just going to comment this out. I'm just going to change it to int because it just needs to be an int. And so I'm just going to create this global variable so that I can take this value and I can pass it between functions. So I can say the wave equals the value that resides at selection, okay, at this place in memory that I've called selection. Okay, so that should be fine. So now we have this. So now we have this this number coming in there properly. So now we need to do something. We need to do something with that. Okay. So we need to say, okay, when the user selects the first menu on the item list, or the first item on the menu list, we need it to be a sine wave, and when they select the second one, we need it to be a saw wave, and the third one needs to be a square wave. Okay, so if you recall, the actual oscillator object itself is of type double. Okay, so what I can do is I can just say, I can create a function here that's going to return a double. Okay, because that's what I need to that's what I need to return. I need to return the actual oscillator to this function so that I can kind of pass it into my audio callback. So I'm going to call this set osc type. It's not going to have any parameters or arguments rather. So what I can say, so you recall that I'm getting, so now I've got this global variable I've called the wave, and now I can say if the wave value is equal to 0, okay, return osc1. So that's the name of our oscillator, our maxi osc object, okay, that we're using to generate the actual oscillator waves. So I'm going to call this oscillator1.sine wave. Then we just pass in our frequency object argument. Okay, and then then I can say if the wave equals 1, return osc1.saw. I think it's just called .saw. Okay, and then we could just say double the frequency. And then if the wave is equal to 2, return osc1.square frequency. Okay, then we just need a condition if something went wrong. So we need an else just to make sure that we're able to account for all situations. Else the wave, else return osc1.sine wave frequency. So it'll just return the first selection if none of these other ones were selected in some sort of weird situation. Okay, so now what I can do is I can go down here to my function and I can say double the sound. Right here I have the wave. Okay, I can erase this because it takes a double as an argument, and I can just put set osc type as the argument. Okay, because what that's going to do is that's going to return a number. That's going to return this series of numbers that refers to the sine wave, saw waves, or the square wave. Okay, and that's how we do that. I'm just going to take this, copy this over here, and paste it just so we have it separated out here a little bit. So I think this is good to go. So let's go ahead and try this. So now what we should have, we should be able to play the different waves. Hopefully I've done all of this correctly. So let's go ahead, pull up our synthesizer. Then I can just connect these values here. I always worry that I've done something wrong and it's going to blow my ears out or something. Cool. So the first selection there, you can see that it defaults to the sine wave, which is selection 0. Then I can go to saw wave, see if that works. And you can see that that works. And then I can go to square wave. And that works as well. So that's great. We've got that up and running and that works properly. So now what we can do really quickly, and I'm just putting this at the end of the tutorial here. One thing that I'm going to mention here is I've actually got this code. This code is going to go up on GitHub. So I'll put the link to my GitHub below, and you can go and you can download the code and change it or do whatever you want with it. And so it's available to you there. And if you want to follow along as well from the beginning of this tutorial and the state that I had it in at the beginning of this tutorial, my last commit was the way that the synthesizer was at the very beginning of the tutorial. So you can grab that as well if you wish. Okay, so what we're going to do now is I'm just going to get out of Xcode for a second, and I'm actually going to go back into the framework itself. So anytime that we're creating any sort of classes, we need to create it within the juicer itself so it registers. So now what we're going to do is, if you remember the ADSR settings that we had and the UI and all of the UI information, I'm just going to take that now and I'm going to put it into its own class. So I'm going to do this. I'm going to try to do it super fast, and it's just going to be kind of a repeat of what I've done with the Oscillator class just now. So I'm just going to call this envelope, and there I have my classes as usual. I've got to do this just so it's nice and neat. Then I'm going to open it up in Xcode, and now it's just a matter of really taking a lot of this and copying it and pasting it into the envelope class, and then making sure everything connects up nicely. So I thought I hit the button. Okay, let's just try it now. Just Xcode is being funny with me. It's taking a second. Okay, what's going on, Xcode? I'm going to force it to quit here, and now I'm going to try it again. Third time's the charm. Okay, Xcode's opening up, and here we are. Okay, great. Cool, I'm just going to build this because the first build takes a long time, and then while it's doing that, I'm going to just start going through and thinking about what I need to do here. So we just need to replicate a lot of the things that we did with the with the oscillator class. So if you recall, so we have this Juce synth framework audio processor. We just need to replicate that object in the constructor here. So the build succeeded. Okay, that's cool. I'm just going to go ahead and stop all that. So I'm going to put this. I'm not going to go through and explain it again because I just kind of explained it over the past however long this tutorial was. So I'm just going to kind of try to fly through this and try to fly through it without making any glaring mistakes and getting stuck. So I'm just going to copy the processor object in here and do this so that So now I need to make sure that the envelope constructor is correct, which I can do like this. Okay, and then I can just paste that in here. I'm just going to call that object P. And then what else do I need to do here? So I need to declare this processor object so it knows what I'm referring to. So we got the initialization list here. I can do that. And then what else do I need? So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go in here and start copying and pasting all of my object creations from what's now in the editor, in the main plugin editor, and now I'm just going to put all of this into the class itself. Okay, and I could just take this, I could just uncomment it now. Okay, I'm going to try to make it all nice and neat without taking too much time. So it doesn't know what processor I'm talking about, so I need to go once again back in here. I need to include the header file. Okay, and then I need to go back into the plugin editor. Don't think I need this anymore because we don't need all the slider. The slider listener class is now going to be here in this class. So I can take that, I can tab it, make it nice and neat. And then we can go back to our CPP. We can just take all of this business, we can exit out, cut it, and then just paste it all in here. And I can just uncomment all of this. Okay, I'm not going to take the time to format it properly here because I don't want to take too much time doing this. And then we need to go back in and we need to just cut this out of here because now this needs to, slider value changed virtual function is now here. And then same thing with the actual slider value changed function implementation here. I can actually just take that, and I can now put that down here. And then I can just go and get rid of all this. Get rid of all this. I'm just going to fill it. I'm just going to do a g.fill all colors black like that. And then my resized, what I'm going to do is I'm going to, where is the, what am I looking for here? I'm looking for my actual sliders themselves where they're drawn. I can actually just take that out, put that over here in my resized. And I can uncomment all of this. And then let's see, what have I missed? I've missed something. Let me just build, see if it'll give me any idea of what I've missed. So, what I've done here, this needs to be envelope. Okay, and then let's build again, see what happens. Okay, so far we're good to go. Okay, but the only thing is we just need to go back and we need to change the dimensions of this. So at the moment we don't have any sort of size or anything for this. So I can say set size. And remember, we've agreed to make the components 200 by 200 a piece. And then if we go here, I can do the same thing that I did for the other, for my oscillator object, in that I created a rectangle of int type. I've called it area equals get local bounds. So I'm just getting that the bounds of the component that I'm in, which is 200, 200. And then we're going to use that reduced call again, which is we're gonna reduce it 40 pixels. Okay, and then I think this is good. So now we need to go back to our processor, and then the editor. So now I need to add it. So it's going to be a child component now of my main plugin editor. I'm just going to call this, I'm just going to do include envelope header file so it knows what I'm talking about. And then I can just say envelope, not that, envelope env GUI. Okay, and then if I go in here, now I can just add it and make it visible as a child of the main component, env GUI, like so. And now what I could do is env GUI dot set bounds. And now basically what I could do is I can actually copy this, because this is going to be the same size as the oscillator. Okay, if I put the envelope before the oscillator, it would then paint the envelope and then paint the oscillator. But we want the oscillator to reserve 200 by 200 of this 400 by 200 window, and then I want the envelope, the UI for the envelope to reserve the other 200 by 200 space that we have remaining. Okay, this is complaining because we need to initialize this, because remember our constructor has the argument for the processor. So I can say mGUI, use the processor as the argument. So that should fix that. And then we're just going to try to build this here. And what we should see is an oscillator component that has its own section, and then the envelope right beside it. So if I go and I connect these up quickly, and now you can see that we have the oscillator section. I could paint these different colors just so you can see the division between it, but I'm not going to do that. So we have the oscillator section here that's taking up 200 by 200. We have the envelope section that's taking the other 200 by 200. Okay, so if I just press this, okay, you can see it's a sine wave. If I just adjust the attack, right, make sure that our release is right. Change it to a saw. Make sure saw works. Beautiful. The square wave. And there we have it. We have a switchable oscillator and an envelope component together, and then we can later on take this and kind of make the UI a little bit more fancy. But that's where I'm going to go ahead and end it today. So next time what we'll do is we'll go ahead and add a filter, and then we'll also start making it look a little bit neater, make the UI look a little bit neater and a little bit more kind of presentable. So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. If you have any questions or any comments or feedback, just drop me a line on the comments below, and I will see you next time.